Welcome to the Brokers Lounge with Eddie and Carlo. Disclaimer: the information contained in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into account your personal circumstances. Please head to the show notes if you want to book a free call to discuss your personal situation.
Welcome to another episode of the Brokers Lounge with Eddie and Carlo. Another week has gone by, and here we are doing another one of those podcasts where we'll be talking about owner-occupied versus investment, and we're going to look into when is it better to buy an owner-occupied as your first property or an investment property. And in this one, there's going to be a bit of a discussion around a lot of the information out there, and we're going to try and give the facts and outline the facts out there for you to decide, and because it's all reliant on personal circumstances. So there's a bit to discuss about, but before we get into it, Carlo, how are you, mate?
I'm doing very well, Eddie. Thank you very much for asking. It's you're right. Another week done and dusted, and we itch closer to Christmas every single day. So it's going to be a frantic end of the year, I can see. It is
very, very fast. It's very fast. But it's always the case. It just seems everyone needs to get their shit done before the end of the year.
It's like the race to coming around the corner to the last final 100 metres. So hopefully there's no hurdles along the way that we trip over. So.
I hope so. Just a smooth ending, and then everyone can have a bit of break, re-energize, recharge, and do it all over again.
We shall be definitely doing that, that's for sure. So,
all right, let's get into it. Ready?
Sure, let's do it. I think it's a good topic, mainly because we probably come across this on a daily basis. Working within the Link Wealth group as well, they're constantly talking to clients about whether they go down the pathway of having an owner-occupied property versus if you don't do that, do you just look at purchasing an investment property instead? So we'll hopefully be able to demyth some of the things that are out there as well.
I guess, yeah. And usually we say it all comes down to your personal circumstances, and it really does, because what you want to achieve, what you can achieve, and how to go about it, it all comes down to...
Yeah, there's definitely no one size fits all when it comes to stuff. And that's with a lot of things to do with finance, really, in the day. If we think everyone can fit into the one little box and work within that, yeah, exactly, you're right. So... yeah, definitely not the case. So.
All right, let's get to it. So, owner-occupied properties are properties that you live in, your primary place of residence. So, they're a good first step for a lot of people to buy your first property as an owner-occupied, especially if you're looking for stability, if you're looking for personal use. And it can make sense, obviously, from a financial point of view, because you're investing in the market, you're buying an asset, you're buying a property, which is a good way to invest, because if that property is the right property, a good location, or whatever it is, it will grow up in value with time, and it will be the property you live in. So it can make sense. But on the other side, if you choose to buy an investment property, investment properties are more designed for wealth creation, because they generate income from the rental income they're getting. You build wealth through appreciation, which is similar to the owner-occupied properties, and we'll get to that in a minute. But you get to choose the property. You've got more options to choose where that property is going to be located, because you're not going to be living in that property. So it can make a sense from a investment point of view. But it comes with higher demands and higher financial risks, which we will talk about. So let's get into the details, and maybe we can go through the pros and cons of each. So
Carlo. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll probably start off with the owner-occupied, the pros of obtaining an owner-occupied property. I guess the first one we can probably talk about is having access to, especially as a first home buyer, having access to the various grants that are available, the government schemes as well. Even when it comes to stamp duty, the concessions when it comes to stamp duty, they're not available if you go down the investment property pathway. So they'll only typically apply when it's for an owner-occupied property. So when we talk about some of the benefits or the pros of having an owner-occupied, that's probably one of them that stands out, especially from a first-home buyer point of view. And we deal with a lot of first-home buyers where they're contemplating, do we look to just get into the market and buy it and rent it out to start off with, or do we actually live in it? And you have to take those things into consideration.
Sure.
Because it definitely can help out. One of the common things that in terms of the differences and the pros of having an owner-occupied property is the lower interest rate as well. So we do see a lower interest rate for owner-occupied properties compared to investment properties. So, which is interesting because normally banks will price according to risk. So it's almost like saying, well, we see more risk in investment property. Some will probably argue there might be the exact opposite to that.
Yeah, true. I guess doesn't that go back to APRA's regulations in terms of
they do
percentages?
Correct. Yeah, they do apply different capital weighting or adequacy weighting for investment property. So that's obviously passed on to the end consumer as well.
And they during the Royal Commission they pushed a lot of lenders to reduce their investment books, and that's why.
Yeah, the whole. I think we got to a stage where there was just so many investment loans that were interest only as well, and APRA was getting pretty nervous around having that many loans on the bank's books that were just sitting there and not actually getting repaid. Yes. So they made sure that the banks were obviously incentivized to price accordingly as well. So. At the end of the day, banks want you to repay your loans.
That's right.
They don't want them sitting there forever.
Not really. APRA wants you to repay.
Well, exactly right. Yeah, exactly. One of the other things that's obviously a benefit of having an owner-occupied property comes with regards to capital gains tax.
Yeah, that's a big
one. It's a massive one because it's probably one of the best investments you can make that is capital gains tax free.
Yes.
Because everyone knows, most people know that when you're purchasing a property for your own use, come the day you sell it, whatever gain you make, there is zero tax on that. So whereas investment property, there will be capital gains tax. There's a percentage applied if it's past, if you own it for more than, say, 12 months, then half of the gains is taxed. So at your marginal tax rate as well. So definitely a good thing to consider for a longer term investment as well. So it's almost like a balancing out, which lever do you want to pull first in terms of,
True.
going down that pathway. So
it is, and that's why we go back to personal circumstances because that's huge. If you've done that first property purchase as your owner occupied, and you get it going for 3, 4, 5 years before you are ready to take that next step, you can sell, use the equity you get, paying zero tax on it, and then buy something bigger. And move to that.
Yeah, and I've heard lots of people who, in the circles of some very wealthy people in this country, and a lot of them do say your best investment is always pour as much money as you can into your family home, because that will obviously go up in value over time, and it's going to be tax free when come the day you actually sell it. So now it comes to a point of like how much money do you actually have to pour into your family home as well? So that's another thing. So, paying off the mortgage and building up equity from the get-go, I think that's a really good one, purely because you're pouring money into it right from the start, and you're seeing the benefit right from the start as well. This is, and it comes back to the capital gains tax at the end as well. The more equity you can create in your property from day one, the more you can do things down the track, you can leverage against it. Typically the usual way of, especially in the past, was buy the family home, pay it off as good as you can, build up enough equity, then go and buy your first investment property, and just keep it evolving that way as well. So, but you talked about the individual circumstances. I think that's a big one as well. That satisfaction of having your own home. You can buy an investment property, and it can work really well for you, and you can still be renting, but there's only so much you can do to a house that you're renting.
Yeah.
Put a picture on the wall. Not much else you can really do to them, because at the end of the day, the landlord is the one that owns the property. So, having your own property or your own home can create some great memories for the family as well, which I think is something you can't monetize. That's you can't place a value on that. That's for sure.
Yeah, and on that one, I heard one of those cowboys out there, property cowboys out there, the other day, and he was saying you don't want to buy an owner-occupied property because you will be emotionally attached to it, and it will have a sentimental value for you, and you'll have the kids growing there, and then you can't sell it and use it. And like,
So
mate,
what?
it's not all about money. To me, creating wealth, this is part of creating wealth, creating good environment for your kids, stable, healthy environment for the kids, having memories there. This is beyond wealth. So it's not all about equity and money and investments. Sometimes there's things more important in life, but it all comes down to personal circumstances and decisions,
If I look at my own situation, I've been in the same house now for 22, 23 years. So, my daughter was only 1 when we moved in. My son wasn't even born yet. So he's literally lived his entire life in our current home. So lots of memories for them as well.
Would you sell it?
For the right price, everything's for sale. But not
stuff memories.
not until the son moves out. So we still need the room.
That's it. And you've built that space for them to grow and know the neighborhood, the neighbors, have that stability of not moving every year or two and changing. So,
and that's the thing. Probably a good one to highlight as well. You own your own home, or you're living in your own home. You can move it in and out of that whenever you want. If you're renting, you are at the mercy of your landlord. I've seen people recently. It's like, we've got to up and go because our landlords decided to put the house on the market.
Especially recently, in the last few years, it's been wild.
Because
there are people they've changed 3 times in the last 5 years.
Yeah, because the landlords are looking to potentially get out of the market because they're sick and tired of taxes and or interest rates going up. So, if you're a renter,
you're at the mercy of someone else.
Well and truly.
Yeah, that's not.
Yeah, so it's probably a good segue to the downsides to
the owner-occupied.
Owner-occupied.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, there's a lot of benefits to it, but there's also things that you need to be mindful about. Mainly, it can be more expensive owning your own home.
Mm-hmm.
From a maintenance point of view, you have to be responsible of the upkeep of the property and keeping everything running and repairing everything that is not working. So that is an extra expense. Also, from probably repayments point of view, especially now in higher interest rate markets, like your repayments on a mortgage might be higher than what you'd be paying if you're renting. So that's something also to consider. But the bigger picture says pay a bit more, but at least you're paying down the debt, you own a piece, and that's the better way of looking at it. Also, your capital can be tied to that property, and it can limit your options on what you can do somewhere else. And I personally went through that when I purchased my first owner-occupied property.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, when you try to get into the first home, you're limited on resources, limited on income you're earning. So it ties you down in terms of you just got to do the job you're doing. You can't invest anywhere else. You can't grow the way you want. You can't invest in your personal learnings or studying or whatever. So it ties you down in that aspect. But that's something I guess you have to go through.
So
that's something you have to go through if you want to grow in life, So that is another one. And then you've got your location constraints where
that's probably coming into the current market, and that people are a lot more constrained. So.
Exactly, like if we all want to live, near the beach or and blue chip suburbs and all that sort of stuff, but it's not realistic really sometimes to get into the market and pay over $1 to $1.2 million average price for properties there. So you're constrained in terms of where to buy that first property, and you have to compromise on something. So sometimes distance is the thing people compromise on to be able to get into the market, and you don't get to choose where you live because you have to go by what you can afford. So buying an owner-occupied property, you're going to have to compromise on distance to work or distance to schools or whatever it is, compared to if you're renting. You could probably rent anywhere you want and be in closer proximity. So this is one of the limitations of an owner-occupied purchase. So probably it's a good leeway to look into investment purchase. If I choose to buy an investment property first,
Yeah.
what's those pros, Carlo?
Yeah, I think the big one's obviously going to be the rental income, isn't it? It's like everyone always talks about having an investment property. You can essentially get rent from someone else and let them help you pay off the mortgage. So, and in the old days, it was probably, the old days, I should probably only talking 6 months ago now, 12 months ago.
60s.
But, rental income pretty much covered the mortgage repayments. And sometimes a little bit more left over. So probably not so much the case at the moment with rates being as high as they are, but definitely a benefit of having an investment property. You've got someone else helping you out and paying that through the rental income. Obviously, there's the tax benefits as well through negative gearing. That's one thing people have to take into consideration. Do they look at having an owner-occupied property and having potential capital gains tax free at the end, or any capital growth tax free at the end, or do they want the immediate benefit now of having negative gearing? So I'm assuming we're making the assumption that it is negatively geared. I can't speak today. That their repayments are obviously higher than the rent that's actually coming in, but obviously use that to your advantage and claim it at tax time, together with all the deductions that you can typically get as well. That's obviously one of the big things as well, being able to claim the deductions, for any potential works that you do to your property, expenses that you have on your property. Whereas obviously owner-occupied property, you can spend as much as you want, and the government says, well, you're not claiming in not even a cent of that. So appreciation potentially can be better than an owner-occupied property, and this probably comes down to the locations. With an investment property, you can typically pick wherever you want. It doesn't have to be in your local state. We're here in Melbourne. That doesn't necessarily mean that when you buy an investment property, it has to be here in Melbourne. Probably in the older days, a lot of people used to like to do that because it's like, I want to actually go out there and see the property and touch it and everything like that. It's like nowadays, who cares? It's for an investment property, it's more of a numbers game. I guess, so long as it makes sense,
100%.
Doesn't matter where it's located. And the good thing is nowadays we've got lots of buyers agents out there as well who help people find properties, especially investment properties. So if they turn around and say, well, we've got a crack of a property for you and it's based up in Queensland, great.
Yeah, probably more than 90% of our investments, our clients, they're not buying in the state they live in.
Yeah, exactly right. So
it's just like, it makes sense on paper, price good, great potential.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
Yeah. And then obviously, we talk about location, that leads to your budget can be a lot different compared to when you're buying a house for yourself to live in, because when you're wanting to live in a particular property, you're more concentrating on the location, which suburb. Potentially, some people will go to which street they want to live in within that particular suburb.
Number.
If you've got kids, does it fit within a school zone as well? Whereas an investment property, like we said, you can go wherever you want. So from a purchase price point of view, you're not so limited. So potentially more opportunities come your way if you're looking at an investment property, purely from a location point of view as well. And obviously lifestyle as well will obviously come into it, purely because if you've got someone else helping paying your mortgage as well, you can then redirect some of your cash flow towards other investments or lifestyle. You might say, well, you know what, with the money that I would typically be pouring into my house to live in, I'm going to go and buy that nice 40-foot boat. I don't know about a 40-footer, but anyway. Or take the holidays every year. So it once again comes down to individual choice and what suits that person.
100%. Yeah.
So
true. Absolutely.
So the downsides?
There's
got to be some downsides.
Well, yeah, obviously there's always downsides, unfortunately. If you have an investment property, you're highly reliant on the tenants that occupy that property.
Yeah.
And this could be great, but sometimes that's not so great. I've known people with tenants that they've had the worst experiences ever, where they haven't paid the rent for a couple of years, they trashed the property, and going through the legal, ways of evicting people or taking your property back, it's such a pain. And all this time you have to make sure you're maintaining the mortgage when there isn't income coming in. So this probably is the biggest factor in buying an investment property. Just making sure we've got the right people that are going to look after the property, not trash it and make it a losing investment in a way. The other thing is what you touched early on is the higher interest rates for an investment loan compared to an owner-occupied loan. So you'll be paying higher interest rates, but it's not a huge factor really. Like the difference is not massive. And with negative gearing, what you claim at the end of the year is the interest you pay. So that interest part of the repayment on your mortgage can be fully claimed at the end of the year and can have deductions on your taxable income. And obviously also you can't benefit from any government schemes or first home buyers stamp duty waivers or concessions.
So they're obviously the pros of having an investment property. So there's obviously got to be some negative parts to it. So
yeah, so the negative bits or the downside that you can have buying an investment property, obviously the biggest one is the tenants that will occupy that property, and you want to make sure you've got the right tenants that will pay you on time, look after the property, not trash it, and give you the least headaches possible. Because I've seen instances where people with investment properties, they had the worst tenants in there, and then they had to go through a process of 2 years to be able to evacuate these people, and then they had to still maintain the mortgage repayments, and then after they left they had to do major renovations for the property to bring it back to how it was. So this is the biggest risk really.
And that it can really change your whole outlook on wanting to have an investment property. And you know, I've had an investment property once before. Now, nothing to that extreme, but I had actually tenants that were very picky. And I think they'd almost read the entire Tenancy Act from beginning to end and knew exactly what their rights were, which is fine. I get that. That's okay. But, you know, something as small as, I think one of the fly screens in the window had a tiny little hole in it, and they had a phobia of spiders. So we had to actually replace it, which means we had to replace the entire house.
They're at the wrong
fly screens. And I'm sitting there going, okay, so you've just cost me this amount of money for something so minor.
Exactly.
But it and I must admit, it actually turned me off having an investment property for a number of years. So I was like, I just can't deal with someone who was constantly on the phone to the real estate agent or the leasing agent, and we'd be getting phone calls saying, oh, they want this, that done, and they want that done, and they're not happy with this. And it's like, guys, just leave. Please just leave me alone. And I end up literally selling the property probably about 6 months later because it's like, I'm done with it.
Wow.
And I just got out of the whole property market for a while. So
wow. Yeah, they're probably really bad.
You're right. That having the right tenant can make or break, you know.
Like I know, I've known a guy who went through probably one of the worst experiences of having an investment property, and he literally was depressed for 2 years because the tenants there, they were like doing drugs and doing parties and trashing the property, and they couldn't get him out. And then obviously they go through loopholes of how to not vacate the property straight away, and they kept pushing and pushing and pushing for almost 2 years. And then after they left, he was still paying the mortgage, and then he had to pay 50, 60K to renovate the property. So
sounds like something you'd see on A Current Affair, isn't
exactly, yeah. And you think it doesn't happen to you, but you never know. So that's one of the risks you run.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Also, the other thing of having an investment property is the investment loan rates, which are higher than the owner-occupied rates. But having said that, with the negative gearing benefits and the deductions you do at the end of the year, the interest bit out of the monthly repayments you do on your investment loan are the deductible bits. So it doesn't really matter. As a matter of fact, sometimes paying a bit more can...
So when you say about paying a little bit more, what are we looking at in terms of difference between having an once again, I can't speak today, an owner-occupied loan compared to an investment property? I'm just going to hold up signs. Answer the question.
So probably about 0.3 to 0.5%, roughly, between the owner-occupied.
It's nothing really.
It is, exactly. So, and the bigger scheme of things, it's not a huge issue, and it does not put people off who want to go down this path.
Yep.
And then the last one would be probably not benefiting from any stamp duty concession or any government schemes. So if you choose to buy the first property you've got as an investment property, you have to factor in paying stamp duties and other fees associated. That would have been avoided if it was an owner-occupied property. Now, probably a question that I get asked a few times, which I'm 80% sure about, because
I think I know where you're going with this one here.
Yeah, you know, like every state has got a different rule. But if I buy the first property as an investment property, am I still eligible for stamp duty concession and government schemes and all that sort of stuff? And the answer is yes, but you have to go through the process, and ultimately the decision is for the state revenue office.
It's a real grey area, isn't it?
Is,
I've on the same. I've looked into it, and it's like it doesn't say no, it doesn't say yes. It's sort of like
and they ask
you may be eligible for a stamp duty concession.
Exactly. So. Yeah, and on the form you complete, it asks you if you've had any interest in property in Australia. But considering you haven't claimed the benefits and you haven't occupied the property, then the answer is yes. So this is pretty much in a nutshell the differences between buying an owner-occupied versus an investment property. What's your thoughts, personal thoughts, Carlo?
Oh, look, it's a tough one because, you know, when it comes to investment properties, like I said earlier on, it's purely a numbers game. But it will always come back to your own individual circumstance and preference.
Yeah.
So if you can almost start to write down the pros and cons for yourself personally and go, well, what's more important to me? Is it about having, you know, a family home where you can grow and create memories and build wealth through that way? Or is it purely just a numbers thing where it's like you don't really care where you have your property and you're happy to continue renting? So, you know, and you can look at it that way. So it's probably good opportunity to talk about some of the strategies that we see a lot of our clients adopt.
Yeah, true. And also just probably to add on that bit, where it comes down to what stage in life you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think ultimately, like if you're starting the path of you're buying your first property, you haven't got a family yet, so you can afford compromising a bit on how to go about it. To me, the ultimate way to do it would be if you can still find something within the proximity of where you want to live. So it doesn't need to be like 100% in the middle center where you want to be. Like even if it's a 10, 15-minute drive, that's very, that's fine. And then if you can benefit from the stamp duty concession and get any other grants that you can get, like you're saving yourself anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 you can save on that first purchase, and then just live in that property for at least a year, and then go on to do the next move and the next step, and that's probably the ultimate way. But then we go back to personal circumstances. What's your goals? What stage in life are you? And probably that's where we can touch on some strategies out there, such as rentvesting, where people want to live in a certain location or area, but they can't really afford to buy there. So what they do is rent in that area, but invest somewhere else and buy another property. So they invested, they've got a property, but at the same time, they chose the lifestyle and proximity and the suburb and area they want to live in. So they've got the best of both worlds. But the problem we go back to renting is at any minute the landlord might tell you need to vacate because I'm selling, or probably this is the biggest one. It's just there's no certainty and
I think I see a lot of that with the younger families who are wanting to get into a certain area from a school zoning point of view. They go, you know what, we can't actually afford to really buy something ourselves in that area right now. So if we rent in that area there, a little bit more affordable, at least we're in there. That's our address. We get the kids into the school that we want them to go into. Then look at deploying money through an investment property and benefit that way. That's and then when it gets to a point where potentially the investment property may have appreciated enough, they may offload it or utilise the equity that they built within that to purchase within the area that they still want. So it can work. It
Yeah,
can definitely
that's
work. So
That's it. Like you gotta have to do it one step at a time based on your circumstances and based on your affordability. Like ultimately, it comes down to affordability. Like if money was not an issue, you can really buy wherever you want, anytime you want. But
yeah,
considering most people can't do that, then you have to take it one step at a time to achieve the goal that you want to get to. So that's one of the strategies. Is there anything else, Carlo?
I think you just briefly touched on it earlier on about, if you're going to utilise the government schemes or first home owner grants or stamp duty waivers or concessions, just hold on to that property for 12 months and then move on from there, if you wanted to. But
sorry, mate, I missed that bit.
Yeah, thanks.
I took your part. This was all his idea. I just said it for the record. Sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry, man.
No, all good.
That's
they're probably the two biggest strategies.
They are really.
We see
yeah,
clients
they
go
are.
with. So,
but yeah, like these days, as you said earlier, a lot of people are utilizing buyers agents and using their expertise and the information they can bring to the table, because really they're comparing pretty much all suburbs in Australia and just narrow it down to top 10 performing based on growth, rental yields, price, population, amenities, all that sort of stuff. And this is what makes a suburb a good potential suburb for growing and, getting in early. So, and I'd be really interested, I don't know, probably there is data out there to show the influence of other state people buying investment properties everywhere, because we've seen like Perth skyrocketing in prices, South Australia, Queensland. And I think a lot of it has to do with Melbourne and Sydney investors buying in those states.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it would be very interesting
Well,
to
I
see.
think we may have an upcoming podcast where we'll get
We
a
should
buyer's
do that.
agent involved and talk about the whole property market and what's happening around Australia. So
There you go.
and we can reveal some secrets that way. So
Hold Carlo to it.
I think that's about it for today.
Yeah. Hopefully
So,
it wasn't too boring, but yeah, that's it for today.
Yeah. So thank you very much, everyone, again for listening in. Hope you've got some good ideas out of all this. Once again, and we've spoken about this plenty of times before. Get a good team around you through a broker, a financial advisor, your accountant, a buyer's agent. And we can help steer you in the right direction. So
I recommend a psychiatrist as well.
That's his recommendation. So, but look, thanks once again, everyone. Subscribe to our podcast going forward. Leave us. I think the main thing is leave us some comments as well. We're really keen to hear your feedback and any other questions you may have along the way as well. But and leave us that 5-star rating. That'd be absolutely wonderful. So until next week,
thank you very much.
Take care, everyone. Bye bye.